You know that feeling when new weapons release and you're on light.gg combing over the perk combos? And you see that pairing that immediately makes you stop and say, oh yeah, that's the one. And then it just immediately drops for you in-game? Yeah, me neither. Well, not usually at least. I did get my hung jury, which has been reprised more times than I can remember at this point, on my first or second little baby 10-round onslaught run. What was the role that I was after? Let's step into the office and have a look-see. And here we are. We got Arrowhead Break maxing out the recoil direction and boosting the handling, Accurized Rounds for a plus 10 to the range stat, Kinetic Tremors that sparks AoE shockwaves with sustained damage, and One for All giving the weapon a 35% damage buff for 10 seconds after hitting 3 separate targets, with the Indomitability origin trait being the icing on the cake. A little extra grenade or melee energy on kill depending on your subclass selection. So why was this the role I was after? Aside from, double damage perks, they do play off each other quite nicely. And both of them are hit activated rather than kill activated, which can be pretty nice for higher end content. I've played with a lot of different roles up to this point, and this is the one I keep coming back to. Not your thing? We can check out some other options. This variant of Hung Jury is rolling with 9 different barrel selections and 7 different magazines. Moving over to column 3, there are some good ones in here depending on what you want to use this weapon for or how you want to kit it out, but I really feel that having Kinetic Tremors in this column is what makes the Brave Arsenal Hung Jury special, and why it's probably worth your time to go out and snag a new one. Column 4 on the other hand is pretty well stacked. Cascade Point, Explosive Payload, Desperate Measures, Precision Instrument, Firefly, Box Breathing, One for All. Every one of them can be useful in their own right. Me personally, I'm a big fan of Precision Instrument and One for All when paired up with Kinetic Tremors, but you really could make a good case for pretty much any of them. So mix and match till your heart's content. But I guess it's RNG based, so hope and pray till your heart's content. But we'll take a quick look at the 2 perks on my roll for any of you who may be unfamiliar. One for All is pretty simple. Hit 3 separate enemies within 3 seconds of each other, and a 10-second cooldown timer appears on screen. During this window, you are going to get a very generous 35% damage increase for Hung Jury, but it is non-refreshable, so you will need to wait for that timer to expire before reprocking the perk. Kinetic Tremors is going to proc on scout rifles with 6 rapidly landed shots on a single target. It creates a stationary kinetic damage field with about a 5-meter working radius at the target's location that will pulse 3 times at 1-second intervals. The damage is AoE based though and can diminish based on a target's proximity, and does vary somewhat depending on the enemy tier that it is procced against. Another nice thing about these shockwaves is that they are weapon bound. So in this case, anything boosting Hung Jury's damage, be it spec mods, surge mods, maybe if the weapon had a second damage perk, it would be increasing the damage of the shockwaves as well. Speaking of damage though, let's go run some numbers. After my disclaimer, of course.
PvE damage numbers are variable and will change depending on content scaling or enemy tier. I've been doing all of my recent testing in the Spire the Watcher dungeon at the Akkalos encounter to keep all collected data consistent and comparable from video to video.
Alright, boss damage versus Akkalos. 3,704 on a crit, which equates to 59,264 in a single 16-round magazine. The time to empty I have clocked in at 4.99 seconds, we'll just call it 5 seconds flat, for a damage per second of 11,853. And while not necessarily sustainable in a true single target damage scenario, with One for All, that crit damage moves up to 5,000 per shot, bringing the damage per second up to 16,000. Looking at the pulse damage from Kinetic Tremors, and while Akkalos isn't the ideal target to test against since he's constantly backing up from the damage field, when they do connect, each pulse can deal a maximum of 7,323 points of damage, so in the full run of 3, that's 21,969. And you will only get 1 Kinetic Tremors proc on your opening magazine. If you're reloading and going in again though, the timing does allow for it to proc twice, once at the beginning and once near the end of the following magazine. And as discussed earlier, One for All can boost the Kinetic Tremor damage, allowing 3 shockwave pulses to deal just under 30,000 points of damage. So, best case scenario, with One for All active and a single Kinetic Tremors proc, we can deal 109,649 points of damage in a single mag, allowing the single mag damage per second to climb up to just shy of 22,000, which is not too shabby for a legendary scout rifle. If you look at Polaris Lance, which I just ran the numbers for a few weeks ago, when unassisted by the nutty set of artifact mods that we have currently, it's clipping right around the same numbers in terms of damage per second. But you do have to take a moment to consider the use cases of each weapon because like I said earlier, One for All is not a reliable single target damage perk. I did run the base numbers versus more applicable targets as well though. Feel free to convert things for yourself if there's any specific information that you are looking for. But the weapon damage itself does increase by roughly 10% when going from boss to major, but the tremor damage does slip a little bit down to 6,024. Going from major to minor though, there is about a 46% damage jump, with the kinetic tremor damage versus red bars coming in at 8,819. Regarding Hung Jury's performance in PvE, even though the weapon has been reprised several times over, I think it's definitely worth your time to try to snag a new one, headlined by the fact that kinetic tremors, typically a 4th column perk, is just kinda hanging out in column 3. Just in its own right, I think it's a great perk. Aside from its solid damage potential and AoE ad clearing utility, I love it versus champions. I'm sure at one point or another we've all been caught on a reload when an overload champion starts to health regen, or just as a barrier champion's putting up their shield. There have been many times in the past for me when that shockwave damage bridges the reload gap and secures a passive stun while I'm busy stuffing more rounds in the weapon. And another nice aspect of the kinetic tremor One For All synergy is that it works in both directions. One For All complements the shockwaves with a damage boost, but those shockwaves are also able to activate One For All. If you proc tremors and it catches 2 additional enemies, that's an instant 35% damage increase if you didn't have it already. Plus, I do think the Indomitability origin trait does deserve a nod. Kills give you a little bit of grenade energy on a light-based subclass, and you'll get some melee energy if on strand or stasis. It is a small bump, but it's not nothing, because lots of small bumps do add up. But admittedly, even though this Hung Jury roll does have a good bit going for it, I doubt it's a weapon that's going to find its way into my main rotation. I think it'll be a very nice tool for high-end content when a slower, more methodical pace of play can be beneficial, especially in seasons where scout rifles find some champion utility in the artifact. So, not this season. But as a general use weapon, or in activities that do require a faster pace of play, this Hung Jury, for as good as it is probably gonna be staying home. I mean, my vault is stuffed to the gills. I got plenty of weapons that can fill that role just fine. I'm really not looking to be running and gunning with a 180 scout. Overall, I think it will be a very useful and very welcome addition to my arsenal, but really only when the circumstances are correct to put it to work. And even though this is not a PvP role per se, we're gonna put it through its paces, starting out with the damage numbers. Hung Jury and other 180 RPM scouts will see 70 points of damage on a crit and 39 to the body. Both do seem to be getting a pretty hard roundup. I'm thinking 69.2 and 38.1 are closer to the true values. That puts the optimal time to kill at 1 second flat, with 3 crits and 1 body shot, applicable versus all resilience tiers. The body shot time to kill is going to be 1.67 seconds with 6 shots versus Guardians running 9 resilience or less. If they're at 10 resilience though, you will need 7 shots, taking 2 seconds. But as you can see there, when that 6 shot lands, Kinetic Tremors procs, coming in for the cleanup. It does deal about 21 points of damage with each pulse, so if an opponent does take all 3, that's around 63 points of potential damage. Then, One For All does award a 35% damage increase in PvP as well. And while I didn't round up 2 others to do the testing, I do have an in-game instance captured. Crits are moving up to 93.4 and bodies right around 51.4. 2 crits and 1 body can down Guardians at any resilience tier in about 0.67 seconds. 5 body shots become lethal in as little as 1.33 seconds. Or 1 crit and 3 bodies will do the trick in 1 second in terms of a suboptimal kill speed. For the physical range on my roll, stat sitting at a 59. It'll hit for full damage from up to 78 meters away. Stepping back from that, damage fall off begins to occur. For Hung Jury's PvP performance, I'm kinda torn. On paper, it's pretty rough. 180 RPM scouts at base get outgunned by pretty much anything. A 1 second optimal is quite slow, and the body shot time to kills aren't that pretty either. And it doesn't quite have the punch or the peak shot ability of 120 RPM hand cannons, which do have comparable time to kills but require 1 less shot in most circumstances to down your opponent. Even within the scout rifle weapon class, every other archetype can set enemy targets down faster in terms of their base damage. Precisions in the past have performed okay with very specific perks, but in general, 180 scouts have always kind of fallen in a weird place. That being said though, I did have some exceptionally good games by my standards, and I don't know if that was because of the weapon or in spite of the weapon. It seemed like it was doing its job pretty well. I kept some space, played around my teammates, and shots seemed to be landing pretty freely. At no point did I ever feel like I was wrestling with the gun to put the bullets on the baddies. It was stable, it was accurate, it has a good amount of aim assist, and if I didn't outright secure the kill, I generally left my teammates with a pretty easy cleanup. Then, Kinetic Tremors, I'm not sure if I actually got it to proc in-game, but the gun does get pretty nutty with One For All. This usually causes me to panic because the "oh my god, it actually happened" feeling swarms over me. So while it can be tough to proc, it does drop enemy guardians pretty fast when it does. So I really don't know how to call it. It would be pretty silly of me to say, yeah, this gun is great just because I had a few good rounds with it, especially knowing it's kinda behind the pack in terms of kill speeds. But I did like it, and it felt like it performed well, so I don't know. I guess you could say we're kind of in a hung jury situation. Good thing this video's almost over. But I'd say though, if you can snag a good roll, give it a try. I'd be interested to hear how it performs for you. But that is gonna do it for this one. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please remember to leave it a like. Feel free to subscribe to the Ironworker Gaming channel if you would like to catch more of my Destiny 2 content down the road. And with that, have a great day, Guardians, and I'll catch you on the next one.